Welcome to the 250th episode of Tales from Korea. That means we are wrapping up the 5th year season of the channel. God, time flies. I must admit the achievement in cold number remains minuscule. Most of my videos garner less than 200 views. But for whatever the result, a consistent run of 5 years of any project calls for a celebration and a reason to feel a bit proud. For the past 1 year too, I went through various topics, from the typical haunted places, ghost encounters, social issues such as Noisy Neighbour, a little trip to 2 major Korean cities, to traditional aspects such as the family dynamic. For this compilation episode, I collected my particular favorites out of over 200 stories I've read you for the past 1 year. I hope you enjoy this revisit. There will be an announcement about the future schedule at the end, by the way, so please stay till the end if you're curious. So, here's the compilation of my favorite stories from the past 1 year. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by yours truly, Anthony. It's a story a teacher recounted in school. His hometown was not far from a nearby city, but his neighborhood itself was still more or less like a countryside village. Among the neighbors was a 20-something-year-old woman who was a bit mentally challenged. She looked perfectly normal, but her mind seemed to stuck in her childhood. She was still rather pretty and good-natured, so her parents seek to arrange the marriage with a guy with a disability too. But then her behavior changed from when, and her belly started swelling. Yes, she was pregnant. Her family was shocked and asked the young woman, but her incoherent mind failed to remember what really happened. They suspected the fiancé, but he strongly denied too. Usually in such a case, they would have chosen to end the pregnancy, but they were so convinced that her fiancé was the father, and because a paternity test would be possible only when the baby was born, the family let the woman have the baby. But when the baby was born and the test was taken, the fiancé was not the father. Desperate family created a little stir in the village by asking the neighbors for a hair or spit sample in effort to track down the culprit. But none of theirs matched. It was the woman's mother who also discreetly submitted samples from her own family too. And it turned out the father of the baby was the woman's grandfather. And that wasn't even the end of the shock and scandal. Apparently the old man was initially very enthusiastic about collecting samples from the village guys, because he knew one of them should be the father of the baby. He had been pimping out his own granddaughter to the guys in the village. He himself also took an advantage of his imbecile granddaughter, but he assumed he should be too old to father a baby, especially among all the other guys. My teacher doesn't know what exactly happened afterwards. It didn't seem that the family pursued any legal action against their own patriarch, and they just moved away, while equally guilty villagers chose not to talk about it at all. My family immigrated to the US when I was 13. The first few years in the new country was not easy. I didn't speak English well and couldn't really mingle with mates. Then, during the summer vacation, Mom suggested me to join the summer camp from her church. It was a joint event by several different churches, was expected to host hundreds of teenagers my age. It would be a challenge, but I was desperate for a chance to socialize and make friends, so I agreed to go. I enjoyed it for the most part. Having lots of activities and games definitely helped to break the ice and get along with others. Then came the last night. It being a Christian camp, the last night was dedicated to a service and prayer into the late night. The light in the big hall was dimmed down except for the lectern at the front. I'm not a dedicated Christian myself, and to me, the sight of some 100 kids mumbling on their prayer in the dark all at the same time looked somewhat bizarre. I felt some weird sense of chill, too, that kept me up though I felt bored to death. What broke the low mumbles from hundreds of mouths was a scream from a girl sitting in front of me. She stood up from her seat and screamed, sending the waves of commotion around the hall. I somehow knew that it was to do with the weird chills I'd been feeling the whole evening. I was somewhat grateful that at least I didn't have to see her face to face. But shit. Slowly and slowly, she turned her body around. My heart jumped faster and faster, but I couldn't run away until her eyes met mine. Her lips bore a faint smile, which made it even creepier. I knew her, not quite friends, but we were acquainted enough to say hello. But the girl in front of me now wasn't the girl I knew. The smile turned to a manic cackle. The pastor that was leading the service ran over, calling for all the members for help. There were some church elders and uni students to assist the program. Pastor directed some of them to guide the kids out of the hall. Assistants moved as fast as they could, but evacuating nearly 200 students through just a couple of exits took a long time. As for me, I was totally frozen right under the white gaze of the girl. Now, the pastor ordered male assistants to hold the girl and pin her down on the floor. They held her limbs, but the girl just took one look at the hands that were holding her and just shook her arms about, and the 4 burly young men were thrown onto the floor. The pastor's voice got shriller. "Pin her down! Use all your weight and strength!" 5 guys, including the pastor, barely managed to pin her down, and pastor started praying out loud. "Oh, Heavenly Father, an evil spirit is torturing your innocent lamb here. Power and glory be with you, my Lord."
My Lord, do you say?
The girl's voice wasn't hers anymore. It was a low baritone. Pastor carried on praying, and 2 other pastors also joined. The girl screamed as if from pain. "In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior, I command you to vanish. Leave the innocent child alone."
No, I won't. Never, never.
She was so defiant that the pastor stopped his prayer for a second, and the girl, or whatever that was possessing her, didn't miss it.
You call yourself a pastor, eh? You worthless sinner, dare to mouth God's glory. I know what you did, you dirty old man. I know what you still do.
The pastor seemed shaken. Sweat soaked his shirt. Other pastor helped him get up and out of the hall. And finally, I also could leave the site with help from an assistant. I still remember how the girls' triumphant laughter echoing loudly in the hall as we left.
I'm gonna come for you too. I'll possess you too.
I don't know what happened to her. By the following morning, she was already taken away from the campsite. Of course, that was the last time I ever joined a summer camp or a church service. As I mentioned in the intro, Chuseok holiday is the day to celebrate and taste the first harvest of the year after the summer's hard work, characterized by the sense of joy and abundance. But my channel being what it is, I bring you one chapter of the history that is totally on the opposite end of that. Probably one of the most disastrous year in the 500-year-long history of Joseon dynasty. 2 terrible years between 1670 and 1671. Bang on from the first day of 1670, a unusual solar halo of red and blue hue was observed, as noted by the Royal Veritable Record. It was followed by almost daily solar and lunar halos, and at least 4 large meteors observed up and down the country in the month of January and February. It was all perceived as foreboding signs, and unfortunately, it turned out as feared, and then some. The year started with a severe spring drought. It didn't rain into May. What came down instead were the bouts of heavy hails and frost that persisted into April, ruining what were planted for the year. On top of that, there was the attacks from locusts, killing off what little green left on the earth. When it finally rained in July, it was in the level of deluge. Flooding and landslides claimed many lives. For the rest of the summer, 6 major typhoons swept through the country. Just to cap this already apocalyptic year, numerous earthquakes shook up and down the country, already from January, then in February, May, August, and December, even though Korean Peninsula is normally earthquake-free. With so much natural disasters, it was a matter of course that various major plagues followed. It even seeped into royal palace and killed some members of royal family. Animals were not spared either. At least 1.6 million cows died of foot and mouth disease. For an agricultural economy that Joseon was, that meant the major loss of workforce. Storms and plagues carried on into winter, and the winter was unusually harsh too. Even Jeju Island, which normally enjoys subtropical climate, suffered 2 to 3 meters snowfall. Now the entire country was in absolute famine. Even some high-ranking government officers died either with a rampant disease or even starvation. Quite a few ministers gave up their high-ranking positions to escape from the helpless situation and plague that reached the capital. The endless catastrophe of natural disasters, diseases, and famine fundamentally unraveled the basis of the society. All sorts of desperate and horrible accounts were reported. Theft and robbery were rampant. Streets were littered with thousands of dead bodies, and the survivors scavenged around to take clothes off from the dead bodies. Parents abandoned kids. There are reported cases of young mothers dropping a child in the well or simply discarding her baby on the street, or of desperate parents tying their children to a tree and running away. Children abandoned their aging parents too. An account describes an adult son who'd been carrying his old mother on his back to beg for food, finally decided to leave his mom behind, and the old lady burst into tears when she realized she'd been abandoned. Another account talks about a couple who were lining up for a bowl of gruel when the exhausted husband died. Even before he could finish the gruel, the wife gulped down the bowl of gruel first, regardless of the dead husband next to her, and only when she was done, bursted into tears. The most gruesome accounts are, of course, that of cannibalism. There are at least several official reports about parents eating their children, but in reality, a lot more and various forms of cannibalism would have taken place. One has to remember Joseon dynasty was founded on Confucian ideology. Social hierarchy and mutual responsibility, from king to his subjects, from parents to children, from husbands to wives, was the fundamental moral structure of the nation. But in the hell that the unprecedented sequence of disasters created, human morality went out of the window. In the normal times, any one of such incidents would have become a national scandal, but now they were just a footnote. At the end of the 2-year-long natural disasters and famine, it is estimated that at least 1 million people died. That's about 1/5 of the total population at the time. This famine was considered a bigger disaster than the war with Japan 78 years prior. The disaster of such a scale left lasting impacts. In subsequent years, there were several cult movements attracting traumatized survivors. The government enforced stricter registration system and neighborhood policing to control the population, and introduced the new taxation consisted with higher tax rate for the rich and less for the poor. Today, scientists theorize that 17th century was in so-called Little Ice Age. Various natural disasters such as drought, harsh winter, and famine were certainly not unique to the kingdom of Joseon. Now a forgotten chapter of history, but it still shows how fragile our human society really is, that our trusted system is nothing against the force of nature. And it could be a valuable lesson in the time of climate change. From a few months ago, I started getting a memo stuck on my door from my downstairs neighbor that I was too noisy from early afternoons. I just shrugged because I worked from 10 in the morning till 10 at night. When the same memo continued, I even left a reply memo that it wasn't me. But the situation escalated without resolve, and when one morning I ran into the young couple downstairs, they swore at me. I didn't swear back, but nonetheless shouted back that I wasn't home all day long. Didn't I explain I live by myself, no kids, no pet? Shouldn't they then rather suspect the next door or their downstairs neighbor instead? It became a proper quarrel, enough for the concierge to step in. But of course, there was no immediate solution. I read somewhere sometimes noise could jump 2 floors down, and I myself started suspecting my upstairs neighbor, who wasn't the quietest of the neighbors either. The young couple downstairs finally realized I wasn't lying about not being home all day long, and I saw them complaining to my upstairs neighbor too. Then one day, when I had a rare day off, I got an invitation from the young couple downstairs that they'd invite me to lunch at theirs as a sign of apology. So we were enjoying lunch together when the thundering noise rang from the ceiling. It was like somebody hitting a mortar straight on the floor. My flat was clearly empty, so we thought it should be my upstairs neighbor. We all 3 ran up there, but nobody seemed in there either. grumbling and wondering. We were heading back down to our lunch, but then realized the noise was banging on from my flat. I rushed in and found a strange guy banging his heel to the floor. I think I have never been so shocked in my life. Police was called in. The young couple stated their accounts, and in conclusion, it all resolved all right. The strange guy in my flat was the former tenant of the place. He had an acrimonious relationship to the young couple downstairs, and it was his revenge to them. I guess it's my fault that I didn't bother to change the lock when I moved in, but how vengeful and obsessive one should really be that he should observe my daily routine and carry on banging the noise for months on. It's truly creepy, should I think about it. It goes 4 or 5 years back. A friend of mine took a part-time as a deliverer for a Chinese restaurant. I and other mates often deliberately ordered something from the restaurant and teasingly welcomed the friend delivering our order. "Oh, our very own delivery boy is here." The season was turning to late autumn, winds blowing about fallen leaves on the street. It was about then the Chinese restaurant started getting a regular order. A woman living in the nearby apartment block, she would order a bowl of jjajangmyeon, black bean sauce noodle, and a pack of cigarette almost every evening. It's not uncommon a client ask for an extra errand when he or she ordered food to be delivered. She was such a regular that my friend just stocked up packs of cigarette ready. Whenever he delivered the order to her door, she only crack opened her door and barely put her hands out to pay, saying, "Please just leave them in front of the door." My friend never saw her face, but her voice was clear and beautiful, so he didn't suspect anything. The almost daily order continued until mid-January. Then the order started coming scarcer. Every 3 days, then 5, then no more for a few weeks. One freezing day, the woman called again and made her usual order. It was a pretty miserable day to the delivery job on a moped. My friend made a stop at a convenience store on the way and bought a hot canned coffee to put it in the jacket pocket and warm himself up a bit. When he rang the doorbell, the door opened wide. The first thing he noticed was there was no usual warm waft of air from the inside. And then how beautiful the woman was, whom he got to see face to face for the first time. Long straight hair reached her waist, and her pale complexion was punctuated with distinctive eyes, nose, and lips. "I'm very sorry, but I don't have any cash on me today, nor any cards. Could it be possible to pay later when I make a future order?" Well, she was a regular, and wasn't she ever so beautiful? Friend assured her there was no problem. He once again noticed how cold the air from her apartment felt. He handed over the still warm can of coffee to the woman. "You should turn up the heater inside. You may catch a cold," Friend said to the woman. "Oh, you are the one working outside in this weather," woman said. "Don't worry about me. It's nothing for me. Anyway, enjoy your meal." "Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for everything. Safe ride," she said. In the evening, he went back to collect the dish and found a noodle just left outside the door, still wrapped and untouched. He rang the door to check if that was because something was wrong with the dish, but nobody answered. He carried on knocking on the door, and an old lady came out from the next door.
"What are you doing there? That apartment is empty,"
the old lady said.
But I delivered an order just this afternoon, and she was home,"
my friend said. The old lady's face turned pale, and just went back inside without further response. My friend felt weird. On his way out, he asked the concierge,
"I wonder if you know, I delivered food earlier to number 609. I find it left untouched. Do you know the young lady living there? Has she gone out?"
The concierge's face also turned stiff.
"Are you saying she was there this afternoon?"
he said.
"Yes."
"But that's not possible."
"I'm sure. You know I come to deliver here almost daily. I can tell it was her."
The concierge's mouth opened, but took a few seconds before he could say anything.
"That young woman passed away a couple of days ago."
Only later, friend could stitch up the woman's story from various rumors. She was a young, kind-hearted nurse, and one day was assaulted by 2 drunken neighbors. During the struggle, a boiling pot of water fell on her, which scalded and disfigured her face and upper torso. She quitted her job and isolated herself inside ever since. With no direct family members or close friends, she lived there all alone, till she ran out of money, water and gas cut, till eventually found dead in a freezing cold apartment. My friend says it pains his heart to think he might have been the only contact from the outworld for her in those lonely, cold last few months for her. To think he was the one she chose to say her last goodbye. When I was little, in the wardrobe of my parents lived a man. I must have been 4 or 5, definitely before I entered primary school. My mom worked, and my dad was supposed to take care of me, but he was a gambling addict, and more often than not, he was away all day long, leaving little me behind alone home. But I didn't mind it. When I was alone home, I opened up the wardrobe and played with a man there. He didn't have a mouth, nose, or eyes, but somehow I didn't mind at all. One day, I was left home alone again, and as usual, I played with a man in the wardrobe and dozed off. What woke me up was a strange sense of chill. I opened my eyes and saw the man standing outside the wardrobe and looking down on me. He put his hand out to me, and I just followed him as he led me out of the house. He pushed me out of the gate, and before I could say anything or hold him back, he just disappeared inside. That day, Dad forgot he left the kitchen stove on, and it started a fire. The house was almost completely burned down, but I escaped without a scratch, thanks to the man in the wardrobe. I didn't see the man again. The wardrobe was reduced to charred ash in the fire. Years later, I talked about it to Mom, and Mom said the wardrobe came with the house, and she didn't know the origin of it. You may think it was all but a fantasy of a lonely, neglected boy, but I can't stop wondering who the man really was, why he was stuck in the wardrobe, and why he was so kind to me. Now it's more than 20 years ago, but I still miss him sometimes. I want to start with that this is 100% true account. None of my friends to whom I confided this story seemed to trust me, but I can only say it did happen to me. My mom divorced Dad when I was 2 and didn't see her ever since, until I turned 11, that is. I was told that Mom returned and was sent to her mom's, who lived not far, but I had never visited until then. The first impression of Mom was, well, fitting for a woman who abandoned her baby, shamelessly puffing smoke in front of her little son. But soon I noticed she was trying, buying me snacks and stuff, and at night she thought I was deep asleep, but I wasn't, and heard her sob watching me sleep. So I got to live with Mom at Grandma's. Grandma's house was in a tiny little village, so small that its local primary school had closed down many years ago for lack of students. I had to take a bus to go to school in the neighboring town, but at least other kids in the village were so friendly and bright. They welcomed me, a stranger, and helped me around. It was long before computers and internet. Kids were all out and about to play every evening after school. The only playground in the village that used to belong to the primary school was falling apart, so we usually gathered under the big old Zelkova tree. All new environment, but I was so happy a while there. Mom was back, and kids in the village were all so kind and made good friends with me. Every evening we met up, went swimming to the lake, went up the local mountain, and ventured out till dusk. But Mom didn't stay long. One day she declared she had to go to Seoul for work. For Grandma to take care of me by herself would be too much of a burden, so it was decided I was sent back to Dad again. That last evening in the village, walking past the old Zelkova tree holding Mom's hand, I looked around to say goodbye to my friends. Strangely, I could see none of them. Normally they would be there waiting for me for another day of adventure. I felt sad to leave without seeing them one more time, but I had no say in the whole business anyway. Back in the life with Dad. Because he normally didn't care much about house chore, it was my job to run washing machine. So that day too, I was throwing dirty clothes in with the detergent, and my eyes caught photos of children at the back of the detergent package. I wondered what it was about and read closely and realized they were photos of missing children. But what truly shocked me was I knew those faces very well. They were my friends from Grandma's village. Why were they all missing now? I once again read the description, but grew only more confused, because the kids went missing all over the place up and down the country. Seoul, Ansan, Gangneung, Busan. It was a few years later that I got to visit Grandma's, and was told that there was no kids of my age in the entire village. But then Who were the kids that waited for me under the Jelkova tree every evening? Why did they resemble the missing children? "7 years ago, my younger brother bought himself a motorbike as soon as he became of age, something that he'd been dreaming for years. And just 2 days later, he had an accident. He took a route around the reservoir, and we are not sure whether it was his own fault or he was trying to avoid something unexpected, but his motorbike slipped and fell over the guardrail. Because it was a quiet road, it took almost a day till he was discovered. By the time I and my parents rushed to the hospital, we were told there was no hope. My brother hung on against all odds and remained unconscious in the hospital for 3 years. Until one day, he finally opened his eyes and spoke. But he didn't say anything intelligible and was in a constant state of agitation. I myself took a half day off from work and rushed to the hospital hearing the news. It was a great news that he woke up, but it was still shocking to see him speaking gibberishes and acting like a caged, angry wild animal. It took another half a year till his speech started making a bit of sense, if still on the level of a little child. But an improvement was an improvement, and his wild animal-like eyes also seemed a bit more calm and sane. But a glimpse of hope was short-lived. One day we got a call from the hospital that my brother jumped off from the 4th floor of the hospital building. He survived again, but with a broken backbone, and it was most likely he would never properly walk again. Mom asked him why he did it with the tears, but brother didn't say anything. Doctor simply said he was still more like a little child and could not control his emotions well, and that should be the reason. It took another long time till brother recovered enough to finally get discharged from the hospital and came back home. Meanwhile, our household shrunk down to a single-room lodging to pay for his long-term and expensive hospital stay. Brother couldn't move easily and spent most of his time lost in his own thoughts at home. At least his speech got gradually clearer and coherent. One day, I asked him why he jumped off at the hospital. He took a few minutes before he said, apparently, he had no memory of before the bike accident, but he still remembers what happened afterwards, and based on that, he thinks he's been to a different world, a different dimension. So far, he didn't mention about it because he was afraid that doctors would think he was mad and put him in a psychiatric ward. But when he got up from the accident, he found himself in the downtown Gangnam. The reflection on the show window showed a different person than himself. Yet he didn't feel lost. He somehow knew where to go, what to do, and mingle with the people about which he had no memory of. He learned that he was a 30-something tax accountant. He lived as that person for 50 years and died peacefully at home. And as soon as that life was over, he woke up and found himself now a different person at the dinner table with a strange woman, who turned out to be the wife of this new persona. He once again led that second life as normal for 20 years, until he was killed by a car accident. And the same cycle continued. One time he was a fisher on a deep-sea ferry, yet in another he lived but a few short days as an old man dying at an intensive care ward. Brother says he must have lived a few hundred years worth of various lives that way. At some points, he tried to seek his old family, us, but somehow he could not find any trace, which made him think these different lives existed in a different dimension, possibly in a parallel universe or something. And when he finally woke up in the hospital as his original self, he couldn't exactly believe that he was really back. He suspected it should be just another iteration of many lives that carried on, to finish off this hospital-bound state and move on to the next life. He thought jumping off should be an easy way out. My grandpa, my dad's father, treated me so sweetly. Whenever I visited him, he would take me to the corner shop hand in hand and bought me my favorite honey snack. Naturally, I liked him a lot, but even to my little kid's eyes, I sometimes felt he tried too hard to win my favor. Even when I clearly was naughty and on the guilty side, he never disciplined me, but took a more appeasing attitude, like,
My handsome prince doesn't do such a thing, does he?
Now, about this recurring dream. I don't remember how old I exactly was when it first started, but I'm sure it was when I was pre-teen. I always find myself in this very modern, clean, pleasant, but somewhat empty space. I think the closest I can compare it to from real life is a large contemporary art museum, just minus artworks. In the middle of that bright space is a big table, and a table full of scrumptious food. Next to the table is a middle-aged woman kneeled down. Not just a next-door type, but very calm and graceful. To put it in more trendy term, she looks the old money. And the woman invites me to enjoy the food on offer. At first, the dishes on the table were those for a typical traditional memorial ritual. Apple, pear, dried cord, dried jujube, grilled beef, some traditional sweets and pan-fried goodies. The only thing non-traditional was my favorite honey snack. For little me, such an old-fashioned food was not my favorite, so I just ate a few pieces of pan-fried meatball, a piece of sweets, and a handful of a honey snack. The elegant lady was clearly unhappy that I ate only so much, but she put on a saleswoman's smile and chatted me up, asking how my parents were doing, etc. And at the end of it, she sneakily asked, "Handsome prince, do you mind if I open the door now?" I just thought, what for? When the temperature was perfect and the diffused sunlight was pleasant, and told her, "Don't open." And then I woke up from the dream. And the same dream repeated several times over the following few years. The setting remains exactly the same, but the menu on the table seemed to get updated bit by bit more towards my youthful palate. It always ended with a woman seeking my permission to open the door and me turning it down. It was about then that I overheard my parents' conversation about my grandpa, things I never knew until then. Apparently, he passionately hated my mom because she's from poorer family. The insults he readily poured onto my mom was apparently beyond description. When my dad nevertheless chose to marry her, Grandpa shunned him away and cut all the contacts. It was only when I was born years later that Grandpa sought to revive the contact, which is curious because Grandpa never bothered when my older brother and sister were born. Come to think of it, I hardly ever saw Grandpa even bother to directly talk to my mom or my older siblings, let alone be nice to them. The same dream returned when I entered high school. And I remember this one clearly because the food on offer was totally different. The entire table was filled exactly with my then favorites. KFC chicken and biscuits, custard tarts, bulgogi sauce burger, sweet potato pizza with a cheesy crust, popcorn chicken, and a big bottle of Coke. They were neatly piled up in the typical memory ritual table setting. For the first time, I lost my mind in the sight of food there. I finished off 6 burgers, 15 custard tarts, 1 full pizza, and a handful of popcorn chicken, like I'd been starving for weeks. And then I still moved on to KFC biscuits. And I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but in Korea, a KFC biscuit is served with a strawberry jam. And there I found just 1 small packet of jam for a whole pile of biscuits. So in the end, I left most of them. The woman, as always, asked with a sneaky smile, "Handsome prince, do you mind if I open the door now?" For the first time, I thought for a brief moment, maybe I should go for a walk since I stuffed myself so much. But I quickly changed my mind that I'd rather take a nap. "Don't open," I said, and woke up. About 2 years later, the dream returned. The table full of food was once again updated to my most recent taste. There were beef quesadillas, sushi, and all kinds of sashimi neatly piled up. Big bowls of spice and wasabi soy sauce were ready too, unlike the mingy amount of jam last time. There was also oven-baked meat sauce spaghetti, topped with golden brown cheese. Once again, I ate them all like a starved man. All the good men are out the window. I just grabbed a fistful of sashimi, chunked it straight into the bowl of spicy sour sauce, and stuffed it in my mouth. Unlike in reality, the mountain of food didn't make me feel heavy. All I sensed was the delicious pleasure on my tongue. This time, I finished them all down to a morsel. The woman carefully approached me. She praised my appetite and massaged my arms and legs with smiles. And then, "Handsome prince, now for once, you wouldn't mind if I opened the door, would you?" And for the first time, I also felt, no, I don't mind at all. Actually, she should open the door. It's hard to explain, but in that given moment, it felt like a certainty without a shred of doubt. How fresh the breeze from the outside would be. Yes, open the door, open it. The woman cackled and sprinted towards the door. And only then I realized for the first time that the woman was wearing a pair of dirty-looking traditional socks. Contrast to her ultra-modern and elegant old-money attire. I couldn't see them because she'd been kneeling down the whole time. As soon as she opened up the door, a crowd of people barged into the space, and I woke up from the dream. I found myself soaked in cold sweat. For the first time, I wondered about the dream. What a weird dream, and how curious. I never thought how weird it is when it repeated over the course of 10 years. In the morning, we got a call that Grandpa passed away. On the second day of the funeral, my grandma, Mom's mother, came to visit and insisted that she should take me with her. My dad refused that Grandpa's favorite grandson should be present, but Grandma didn't back down.
"God showed me a vision. A devil is tempting my grandson. It's all because your father worshipped devils."
Not only Grandma has lots of baggage about Grandpa, who treated her daughter like a shit, but initially she wasn't happy about my parents' marriage either, because to a devout evangelical Christian's mind, she couldn't take Grandpa favorably, who was very superstitious and firmly believed in traditional shamanism. In the end, Grandma managed to take me away from the funeral. On the way, Grandma told me, "In my dream, I saw a devil opening up the door in front of you, my boy. A door to the hell." It's a story my friend told me. She and her hubby are a newly wedded couple. One weekend they went on a trip. When they found the holiday cottage they booked was tucked away in a remote corner and was not even marked on a map app, they felt a bit baffled. But the dusk was already setting, so they just settled in the cottage for the night. After a light dinner and some cans of beer, they went to bed, and her hubby started making out in the dark. My friend felt tired, but he seemed to have an urge, so she just let him carry on. Indeed, he seemed more excited than usual and moaned and groaned, unlike his usually more reserved manner. Did he have one too many cans of beer or what? She wondered. When the deed was done, she saw the dark silhouette of a hubby lifting up off of her.
God, that was good. It's been 8 years?
He said, followed by a dozen other voices, giggling and jeering from under the bed. My friend was startled and sat up and found her husband deep asleep next to her. She was so terrified that she could just silently shiver and shed tears all night long. And as soon as the dawn broke, she woke hubby up and hurriedly left the cottage. On the New Year's Day of 1994, I just turned 20. With the last year of high school and SAT behind, I wanted to kickstart my 20s with something special. So, on the last day of 1993, I headed to Gyeongpo Beach on the east coast to see the first sunrise of the new year, and then headed to Ode Mountain. I must say I felt very proud of myself and felt like some lone hero of an epic film. Weather was on my side. It wasn't too cold and didn't snow. It was already 2 in the afternoon by the time I reached the beginning of the trail, but young and confident in my own strength, I thought I should be able to make it to the camping ground before the sun should set if I hurried. It was a quiet hiking. I ran into a few fellow hikers only when I reached the high point of the trail. A cup of hot coffee a kindly lady offered me boosted my energy, and I decided to go further up rather than directly head to the camping ground that I initially aimed for. I just thought I should meet other hikers there again too and follow them down the route. But I was wrong. The dusk set quickly in the mountain just past 5, and I saw not a soul all the way on the trail. I frankly started feeling overwhelmed, but I hurried my walk. So long I stayed on the trail, it should be fine, I thought. By 6, it got completely dark. I was still on the trail, but I was more and more unsure that I had to check on the map time after time. The point I wanted to reach was nowhere near in the sight. Guided by the feeble flashlight, I walked another 3 hours. Frantic steps got heavy with exhaustion. and panic turned to despair. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was lost. For 5 hours, I constantly walked with no food or water apart from the cup of coffee. I must have been clenching my jaw so hard with the tension the whole time that I could hardly open my mouth even if I wanted. I dropped on the spot and sobbed, feeling even more panicked that I, a grown-up ass man, was now helplessly sobbing on the ground. But I couldn't possibly spend the night there. If I at least reached the top, I should be able to reorientate my direction, I thought. So I stood up and walked further. However, before I knew it, I was completely out of the trail. I found my feet swimming across the pile of fallen leaves and myself trying to climb up steep rocky slopes that was clearly not a way. I was deeply shocked. I didn't know how one can lose all the sense in a state of panic. Time was now passing midnight. I was so exhausted that even breathing felt like a labor. I finally concluded to stop and wait till the dawn broke. I found a spot with a high pile of fallen leaves and opened my sleeping bag underneath them. It wasn't too cold, but the deep silence and sense of isolation was terrifying. I played my Walkman on speaker to chase it away, and fell asleep.
Oi! Oi!
What woke me up was a bright light and a voice. I must have fallen deep in a sleep, and it took a moment to realize the situation.
What the heck are you doing here? You'll freeze to death. Are you all alone?
The voice said. I'm sorry, thank you. Where am I? I shut up and said. It was still dark all around, and when the flashlight that was blinding me was lowered, I saw it was a 30-something-year-old man.
You look like a young student. You should know it's deadly to sleep out here, he said.
I think I'm lost. I got so scared and tired, so...
Huh? It's the music that saved you. I first thought it might be a ghost or something when I heard music ringing out of nowhere here. But it led to you. Looks like you're not even familiar with the route. Anyway, come, follow me. I picked up my sleeping bag and hurriedly joined him. Time was about 3 in the morning, and snow started just falling. Thank you, sir. You saved my life, I said. But the guy just walked on with no reply. So I just shut my mouth up and followed him on for a good 20-30 minutes. I suddenly felt dizzy. Sorry, but I feel a bit funny, I said, and shook my head to regain the focus of my sight. The next moment, the man in front of me was there no more, who was walking just a few steps ahead of me a second ago. Every cell of my body felt like quivering with a shock. I couldn't understand what just happened. Was he a ghost? Or was I gone mad? All the strength washed out of my body, and I felt like fainting. But I shook myself up and looked round. Wet snow was flying all around, and I could hardly see anything. But, oh, I saw something. A signpost. I was back on a trail. I took out my map and realized I had well passed my initial destination and was closer to the next peak. It was such a relief to figure out where I was again. I was so scared to lose the way again that I decided to wait till dawn by the signpost. At one corner of my mind, I think I hoped the strange guy might reappear again too and confirm everything was normal and as it should be.
But as I calmed down, I realized a few things I missed earlier. He said the music from my Walkman led him to me. The music had already stopped by the time he woke me up. The cassette tape was barely half an hour long from start to finish, so it would have automatically stopped, well, hours before he found me. It should be impossible. He had just stared at me for 2 hours between when he found me and woke me up, shouldn't it? What was it then that he heard that guided him to me? Or was he really a ghost? My mind was so busy speculating that I forgot hunger and exhaustion. Thankfully, the dawn finally came. It was still foggy, but snow stopped, and I could find my way down. Later I learned the section I lost my way is considered a tough route with a lot of rocky terrain and unexpected cliffs. Indeed, there have been not a small number of fatalities from fall or being lost in downpour or snow. I'm still not sure who the man was, and if he indeed was a ghost. But whatever the case, there's no denying I owe my life to him. Spring 1975. I was a uni student then. The country was under a turmoil since the dictator-president changed the constitution, basically granting himself the power for the rest of his life. Universities were the epicenter of anti-government, anti-dictatorship movements, and the authority countered it by closing down universities. I got sick of the whole situation and went on a backpack trip around the country. When I reached Daegu City, toothache was killing me. I had to seek a dentist. Apparently a molar was decayed down to its root and it had to be pulled out. After the operation, I was told I needed an antibiotic shot to prevent infection. With my mouth still full of blood-soaked cotton balls, I dropped my trousers for the shot. The cold of the alcohol swab and the sharp scratch of the needle poking my bum. And then I died. Apparently I had a serious allergy against penicillin. Of course, I didn't know I was dead. I just felt my body lifting up, and I found myself walking along. I say walk, but not quite. It's hard to describe, but it was half like floating. The ground itself I was walking on felt like a cloud or a fog, and this fluffy world was shining in the multiple of pastel colors, light green, pink, baby yellow. It may sound kitsch in my description, but I can tell you it was beautiful beyond word. And I walked along that way like I was carried by a breeze. All around me was also fantastical music. I don't remember any of the tune now, but it definitely didn't sound like a typical religious music, that much I can say. Just like the all pastel-colored landscape, the music too made me feel calm and happy. The way ended when I reached a wide river where golden stream flowed. I thought I had crossed the water. I was convinced I must cross it. I walked up and down the river bank to figure out a way to do that. Then I ran into 2 black dogs. Maybe they were to offer me a help? But one of them jumped on me and bit my ankle. I screamed with pain, and with that, the colorful fluffy ground under my feet opened up, and I fell down, down, down. When I hit the ground, I woke up with a startle and found myself lying on the stretcher with a dentist and nurses around me. On my back were God knows how many syringes stuck. From what the nurse told me, as soon as the penicillin shot was injected, I dropped dead, with my heart stopped. Allergy to penicillin is rare but known phenomenon, and I did take a test if I was allergic before the shot, but in some very, very rare case, the test result can be false, as mine was. Immediate epinephrine shots were the only treatment, and several shots of them brought me back. Doctor said I was in a sense lucky that I showed almost instantaneous reaction to penicillin. In some cases, anaphylactic shock occurs sometime after the shot, and if I got the shock, say, on the bus way back to my lodging, I was sure to die before any help could arrive. To this day, I carry a note in my wallet wherever I go that I'm allergic to penicillin, for the case of emergency, but also as a kind of memento of life and death. "5 years ago, I was serving in the army and just became a sergeant. In my base, very close to the border to North Korea, night watch included a stationary one that stayed at the checkpoint and a mobile one that kept patrolling along the fence. That night, I was on the mobile night watch with my junior Corporal Park for the 3 to 5 in the morning slot. Normally nothing much happens, and it's more or less an involuntary midnight stroll of a sort. So we were nearing the end of the usual patrol when we saw a person from afar. At that hour of the day, there shouldn't be anybody moving around in the base. Could it be an orderly officer? But that couldn't be, considering he wasn't in his gears or carrying a rifle. Fortunately, the mystery guy seemed not to have noticed us in the dark, and we could carefully approach. The guy took the narrow path up the hill. It only added to our suspicion because that path didn't lead to anything other than the Buddhist temple. Bigger military bases usually have a church and temple facilities inside for the soldiers. Oh, could he be really some intruder from North Korea? I said.
Please, Sergeant, don't say that,
Corporal Buck said. I thought it was yet too early to call for a backup, so decided to keep following. Load your rifle, I said to Corporal Park. Because the base was close to North Korea, the routine watches carried live bullets, albeit the first 2 in the magazine were blanks. Didn't realize at first, but the mystery guy was carrying something. A bag? A sack? A bundle? Soon he stopped by the temple, took out a shovel from his sack, and started digging. I couldn't think any rational reason for any normal person to be digging at that hour and situation. He must be a North Korean spy or something. He should be planting a bomb to explode for the Buddhist service the following day. My mind was busy with flying imaginations. Whatever he was, I would win a prize vacation, or who knows, a medal, should I catch him, I thought. I'm going to challenge him. Stay behind, keep aim at him, and shoot the blank bullets if he attacks, I told my junior, and approached the guy. Stop, or I'm gonna shoot! The man stopped shoveling in the middle. Raise both hands!
Aye, it's me,
the man said. Who is it? I said to move!
It's me, Lieutenant Kim of the supply company.
I knew Lieutenant Kim well, so I directed a torchlight to the guy's face. He promptly hid his eyes with an arm, probably because the sudden light blinded him. But then I could still see his frame and voice were not that of Lieutenant Kim I knew. I can't identify you. Drop the shovel and drop to the ground, I shouted.
What the heck are you talking about?
I repeat, drop the shovel and drop to the ground. I'll fire if you resist.
Son of a bitch!
He shouted and aimed his shovel at me. But, bang! Corporal Buck, who was watching from behind, hidden, fired his rifle. Well, it was a blank shot, but it was just as loud as a real thing, and it rang all around the base. The guy dropped the shovel and started running away. I finally radioed to ask for a backup and informed where we were and where the guy was heading to. By the time we chased him all the way to the rear gate, we had already fired all 3 blank shots between me and Corporal Buck. Should we fire the live bullet now? But thankfully, the backup moved quickly and was already waiting for the guy by the gate. He was quickly subdued by the backup force, who clubbed him down. His identity revealed under the torchlight was an officer of our base, but from a different company, and certainly not Lieutenant Kim. But then why did he run away? I remembered the sack he was carrying and mentioned it to the officer in charge. The sack was promptly retrieved, and the faces of soldiers carrying it were blue. Meantime, the orderly officer joined and ordered to reveal the content, but the soldier who was carrying the sack said,
"Sir, it's something too serious to check out here. We'd better do it back in the office."
So we did indeed, in presence of the officers, I and Corporal Puck. They were body parts, arms and legs to be precise. I almost threw up at the sight. Military police investigation and hellish interrogation followed after another that lasted for days on. The conclusion was, the culprit tried to borrow money from his girlfriend, but repeatedly rejected. He suspected the girlfriend's mother was influencing her from behind and took grudge. And one day, he got drunk and killed the mother. He cut up the body and thought inside a military base could ironically be a safe place to conceal them. So he took the lighter parts to bury them at the quietest corner of the base. But such was his luck that he was spotted by us. I didn't get any prize, vacation, or a medal. We were just sternly warned to keep our mouths sealed. December 2012, the last winter of my 20s. I got to meet a couple of friends for the end of the year drink. We've been friends from high school, but as usual in the busy life after the military service and full-time work, we didn't get together up very often. Us all 3 didn't drink much, but we were happy to catch up with how we'd been over some beer. The topic of chit-chat went through this and that, and somehow reached horror and scary stories. I've never had such an experience, nor anybody I know around, so I just recounted the story I read on the internet. And when it became the turn of one mate, he seemed to consider whether to tell it or not, and then said in rather grey tone,
Do you guys remember him? 승철?
Who? Neither I nor the third friend seemed to remember.
Don't you really? The dark little skinny boy who had a bit of a potty mouth. We hung around together a few times.
The mention of a potty mouth did trigger the image of the boy I didn't bother to remember for a long time. We weren't very close friends, but my mate went same middle school with him. Right. What about him? I said.
I'll tell you his story,
said the mate with a serious face. Seung-chul was not from a happy family. His dad was an ex-gang member and an ex-convict and worked at construction sites. The nature of the work took him away from home most of times. When he was home, he would get drunk and lament about his once good old days. Seung-chul's mother ran away shortly after he gave birth to him, and Seung-chul never saw her. His stepmother... well, she didn't abuse him, but she just didn't give a shit about the boy. She didn't even bother to make meals for him. So no wonder Seung-chul remained so small and skinny, neglected by both parents. On top of that, he didn't do that well at school, nor very sociable. He would have made a perfect target for bullying, and indeed at the beginning of the year, a bully slapped Seung-chul's back during a recess and ordered him to go fetch him a bottle of Coke. Seung-chul may be small and skinny, but he was vicious. The bully stood a head above him, but Seung-chul shouted,
"You son of a bitch!"
jumped up, and bit on bully's neck. The bully's gang tried to detach him, but Seung-chul wouldn't let go like a bulldog. When the teacher got involved and finally managed to take Seung-chul off, there was quite some blood on the floor. The bully was taken to hospital to get stitched up. Next day, the bully's mom barged into the classroom, shouting some low-life almost killed her precious son. And Seung-chul hit back with, "My God, I have never seen anybody swear so masterfully like some rapper at a battle." The mother of the bully didn't stand a chance against him, and just left red-faced. As a result, nobody dared to touch him for the rest of the school years. He earned numerous nicknames: Mad Dog, Leech, Zombie. Most memorable one was Bloody Teeth. Going to university was not Seung-chul's option. He sought work straight after graduation. But what can a 19-year-old do with no training and experience? Typical part-times at internet cafes or convenience store paid so little, and he rather looked to get a factory work. But even then, most employers took one look at his little stature and turned him down. They assumed he would be too weak and wouldn't last long. When he was finally offered a place, it was at a car parts assembly line, good 2 hours away from home. It was a small factory full of foreign workers and those too old to find any other place. There was hardly any welfare for the employees, and Seung-chul had to find a room out of his own pocket too. He, of course, had to find the cheapest possible, and managed to find for about 130,000 won, about $110 rent per month. It came with a well-worn fridge and a washing machine, and wasn't too tiny, if inevitably shabby. Seung-chul was hired just in time for the busiest time of the year. The factory was always short of hand, and Seung-chul was put to work day and night for extended hours and shifts constantly. The bastard of the owner didn't give a F about the safety or well-being of the employees, and the work environment was quite hellish. I guess only the mad dog Bloody Teeth Seung-chul could endure and carry on. After another overnight shift, he came back to his room and sprawled out on bed. Couldn't even think to take a shower. And then he got his very first sleep paralysis. Eyes were the only parts he could move, and the eyes rolled towards the bathroom for the creaking noise of its door opening. At first, all he could see was just the pitch dark inside, but as his eyes got used to the darkness, he thought he saw something wiggling in the darkness. When he finally got up past the midday, he found the bathroom door opened ajar, just like he saw in his sleep. That was just the beginning. Since that day, he got sleep paralysis almost every other day. The situation repeated more or less the same. He would see the bathroom door opening. Sometimes he saw something inside. Sometimes he heard the groaning of a woman. The work was killing already, and not being able to rest proper was too much. He sensed his health declining rapidly and knew very well he couldn't carry on for long. But he had no other options, because he had nowhere else to go. Shortly before starting the job, he had a quarrel with his stepmother, and for his fiery temper, he pulled her hair. The stepmother snitched it to his dad, with the double and triple exaggerations, and he was thrown out. He didn't intend to stay at the hell of a factory for long from the beginning, and started sensing something was wrong with his cheap room too. But he hadn't yet saved enough to find another place, so... Then he got one precious free day, and got to clean the room. While mopping the floor, he happened to lift the cheap plastic floor covering a little, and was surprised to find it was hiding a big dark brown spot. It could have been anything, but he couldn't shake off the hunch that it should be blood stain. Now he was convinced the room came with some dark history. And that night, he had the worst of his numerous sleep paralysis episodes. The bathroom door opened, and Seung-chul saw something in the darkness inside, and for the first time, he saw what it was there, distinctively. A woman, crouching over the toilet bowl. When she lifted her head, her eyes were all white. When opened her mouth as to say something, blood formed and dribbled down. She slowly crawled over to Seung-chul, dropping blood from the mouth. Seung-chul instinctively knew that he'd be dead if she reached to him. For the first time, he prayed for help from Jesus, Buddha, Allah, or whatever. And as the woman's hand scratching over his cheek, he finally got up, drenched in sweat. When he went to the bathroom to wash off the sweat, he gasped to find his reflection on the mirror, bearing red scratch mark over his cheek. As soon as the day broke, he went around the town to find just what exactly happened in the room. He got his answer pretty quickly. Apparently everybody in the neighborhood already knew. Only he didn't know because he was kept so busy at work. There used to live a Chinese couple, married or just girl boyfriends who knew. The man was morbidly jealous, and the couple was heard quarreling frequently until one day it got quiet. So quiet for days on. When the landlord finally visited, the woman was found dead, crouched over the toilet bowl, and the floor was covered with blood. The shabby fridge and the washing machine the landlord made so much about also used to belong to the Chinese couple. My mate heard all these when Seung-chul moved out from the hell of a room and crushed at his for a couple of nights. But since the mate went to take his military service, he lost contact. Seung-chul had no presence in group chats or other social medias, and when mate rang his old number, it wasn't active anymore. So he totally lost contact with Seung-chul Until a few days ago, that was.
I ran into him in front of a Swan station,
Mate said.
I saw the familiar silhouette and called out, "Singchol!" I was shocked when he turned around to look at me. He was more than skinny, almost gaunt, and even darker. He looked like he was well over 40. Before I could say, he ran away, jumping on the bus that came first, leaving me baffled and speechless behind. God knows what the poor boy has gone through to look like that. Life is so unfair,
Mate said. I'm a lawyer. Nothing fancy. I used to work for a small law firm in the cheaper side of town, and cases I got to deal with were also invariably petty. The consultation hour was normally on a weekday, but for some urgent cases, we did accept an appointment for after work hour or on weekend too. That rainy, gloomy Saturday, I turned up at the office for one such an urgent request. People coming in for a legal advice would hardly ever look bright and happy, but the man who came with a big bag full of papers in his arms looked particularly grim. I could just tell his case should be closer to impossible. But then, I can't say I was prepared to hear what the man had to say.
Have you ever felt you're cursed?
Was his opening line. He was a fairly normal man of his age, married with children, and his business running well enough to make a comfortable living. Then he met a young woman and started an affair. It was all fun and exciting at first. Sneaky date on weekends, occasional liaison on lunch times and after work. But when his wife found it out, and the in-laws threatened that they were going to pull the investment they made to the man's business, he caved in and decided to end the affair. But the woman was already pregnant. The man persuaded his lover to get rid of it and let him go, but she refused. He threatened her that he would leak all about her affair with a married man and pregnancy out of the wedlock to her university, friends and family if she kept hanging on. And that way, he managed to dump her. The poor young woman, broken-hearted and resentful, chose to end her life with her baby still in her womb. So, is it the woman's family suing you? I asked the man, but he stopped me and said I should listen to his story to the end. Since his lover's tragic death, the man started to experience a series of misfortunes in every aspect of his life, slipped and fell for no apparent reason and suffered a concussion. Something pulled his ankle that he fell from a staircase. The brake of his car malfunctioned at a critical moment that he had a crash. Made such a basic mistake as typing in a wrong number in a business contract, causing an unnecessary fuss and loss. On top of it all, he started suffering terrifying sleep paralysis every night too. Of steps walking around, mumbling something, and he would crush his chest down so hard he could hardly breathe. Could it really be his dead lover? How deep her resentment should be to be able to crush him down with such a force when she was but a slight fragile thing in life. Things got only worse, and the man started catching a glimpse of the dead woman among the crowd under the broader daylight. In the end, he seeked a shaman. The shaman confirmed the presence around him was his dead lover, but the solution was not as straightforward.
She does have lots of grudge, but we could try to console and appease. What is much, much scarier is the ghost of the unborn baby in her.
An unborn baby, still connected to its mother via umbilical cord, doesn't yet have self-awareness nor the ability to form a coherent thought, not even in the level of "I hate you" or "I want revenge." All it feels and knows are primal. Hunger, fear, cold, in other words, the survival instinct. It trumps any reason or human emotions, and when an unborn spirit decides to haunt you, it is impossible to persuade or negotiate, especially when the person is linked to it by blood.
The reason you feel poorly now is because the baby has wrapped you all around with its umbilical cord. The ghost of your lover cannot move on either, even if she wanted, because the baby, still connected to her, wouldn't let go of you, shaman said.
The man begged and pleaded to the shaman for help, but she turned him away, saying it was beyond her ability. Desperate men traveled up and down the country to seek any shaman, fortune teller, exorcist, monks, but common among them only saw him as an opportunity to leech huge sum of money, and those with genuine spiritual insight all threw him out even before he could explain his case. After a few months of such desperate pilgrimage, he met this shaman. Now, I got to learn about this only later, but not all shamans are equal. Those who serve a lesser spiritual entity may exert only minor power, but it is less charging on them, and they can carry on in their role for a longer period of time. But the stronger and more dominating the deity is, the job of serving them as a shaman gets the more stressful and consuming, and it can last only for a short period of time. For the same reason, the instinctive power of insight manifests the strongest when a shaman is newbie before he or she gets consumed by the sheer power of the deity. And this shaman the man ended up with was such a case. Her god was so powerful that she had made an agreement that she would serve it only for 3 years. She won a notoriety as soon as she began to work, frequented by clienteles of the rich and the powerful, and yet solely relying on the divine power of her god, she neglected any deeper understanding of her work and looked down upon other lesser shamans. She took one look at the man, and of course could tell what was going on.
"Nobody would help me,"
he complained.
"Of course they won't, but I can help you," the shaman said.
The pay she demanded was bigger than anything other shamans or exorcists ever asked for, but for him she was the only hope left. Fortunately, as a man of business, he could somehow gather the amount she wanted.
"This is going to be a bumpy process. Maybe we have to throw rituals 12 times, or even kill them all. But whatever the case, you have my word. I will get rid of all the ghosts around you," shaman said.
For the following few months, the man and the shaman practically lived together, sometimes the exorcism lasting the whole day. Time after time, the baby ghost seemed to be chased away, but time after time, it once again traced its way back to the man, following the umbilical cord, and the man had to suffer another suffocating night. But at the end of the few months,
"I got rid of them all. You are completely free now,"
the shaman declared. Indeed, the man felt he could breathe and see freer and easier than ever before. He was overjoyed and relieved. He resumed his normal life. His sleeps were sound, his relationship with his wife and children restored, his business ran smoothly again. But then, one night, he got sleep paralysis for the first time since the exorcism was wrapped. He panicked, but didn't that powerful shaman guaranteed that he was free of any ghosts now? This must be nothing, he thought to himself, and tried to fall back to sleep. But then, in the dark of the corner of the room, he saw a shadow figure of a man. His head was hanging down by the grotesquely stretched neck. He came slowly closer to the man, swaying his head side to side. The burst-out eyeballs twitched, gazing down on the man, and he whispered, "Die! Die! Die!" all night long. When the man got around again, it was already morning. He tried to convince himself it was just a very bad nightmare. Well, it wasn't at least his dead lover or the baby, was it? But when he got another sleep paralysis with a terrible headache, he knew something was terribly wrong. This time, it was a little boy whose skull was broken up, jumping on the man's head all night long. And from then on, he felt presence around him even under the broad daylight. He would lift his eyes from lunch and see a ghost sit across the table, or in the middle of a business meeting, a head stared at him right next to his face. What truly scary was, not only he, but people around him, his family and colleagues too, started to experience the same phenomenon. They suffered night terrors, and their face would turn white staring at a random corner of the room. Various uncanny accidents and misfortunes happened to them too. When the news of his factory burnt down reached him, the man couldn't deny it anymore and revisited the shaman who cleansed him, only to find the shaman closed down her business and disappeared without a trace. He visited the very first shaman, who, though couldn't help him, but at least patiently explained his situation. But this time, as soon as the man stepped in, "Get out! Out!" she screamed shrill and chased him away. All the other shamans he tried to see reacted more or less the same way too. Another a dozen such encounters, the man could somehow stitch up from the bits of comments these shamans threw at him. Apparently, that shaman that exorcised him was indeed powerful. She did get rid of every last spiritual presence around him, including his guardian spirits. Guardian spirits can come in many different forms and shapes. Most common ones are the spirits of one's family ancestors, but could be the guardian deity of your house or town, your dead pet that adored you in life, or sheer good karma from the previous life. But the overzealous and inexperienced shaman stripped the man of them all, every shred of it. In spiritual terms, the man was now an open house with no defense at all. Any passing naughty spirit or evil could easily enter him and vandalize. They fought against each other to take hold of the man, and those that were kicked out of him instead took their chance with others around him, namely his family and friends. That repeating time after time, situation got even worse. Just as a path naturally forms over a grass field where many people habitually walk past, having numerous spiritual entities coming in and out of the man formed a kind of spiritual road through which even the spirits that didn't have any interest in him would end up sucked in. At that point, I was having a headache listening to the man's story. Now I made some research myself and know a bit better, but at the time I couldn't follow the outlandish story really. Shamans? Exorcism? Ghosts? In other situations and from a different person, I would have just scoffed in the face. But on that grey, rainy Saturday, from the dead serious and grim-looking guy, it just felt too spooky. And why the heck automatic door to my floor was keep opening and closing? My office used to be a hair salon, and all the walls were made with floor-length glasses. Though for some privacy, the meeting room where I and the man met had some frosted effect up to about chest height, but through the clear upper part, I could still see the door keep opening and closing. So, what do you want me to do for you? I asked the man. I was just a lawyer, not some Catholic priest after all.
I want to sue the shaman that exorcised me for the damage she caused me,
he said. If it were a medical case, unintended and uninformed harm could be the basis of such a sue, but for a spiritual matter, with no tangible evidence? The man must have read my thoughts.
I see what you want to say,
he said, and packed up piles of papers he brought with, and walked out. Oh, God. I needed some fresh air and probably a cup of strong coffee after that. I picked up my umbrella and headed out myself, but stopped short in front of the automatic door because I could only see the footsteps of the man and myself. It was still pouring outside, and if anybody else came in, there must have been dirty footsteps and water drops from umbrellas. But nothing. Then why did the door open and close so many times just earlier? I suddenly reminded of what the man said, that he became a passage for spirits, and numerous entities constantly passed through him. But, God, such nonsense couldn't be true, could it? Right from the following business day, a staff cut right over her hand as she cut some paper. Another crushed his car as he tried to park it at the basement parking lot. The toilet leaked and wetted the floor, and a visitor slipped on it and fell so hard that he suffered a concussion. Then 2 clients came to the office to settle a legal conflict, and as soon as they stepped past the automatic door, they suddenly wrestled with each other so much that we had to call police. And these were just some of the endless series of weird accidents and incidents. Nobody understood what was going on, but I couldn't shake off the story the man told me. In the end, I couldn't shake it off and decided to move to another law firm. "18 years ago, I was 11. I found myself a bit of time before the cram school started, so I turned on my computer to play some game that I was into at the time. As usual, just one more round became 2, 3, 5 rounds of game, and I missed the shuttle bus to the cram school. I decided to play some more game and just take taxi to the school. My parents were usually busy running a shop and gave me rather a lot of pocket money as to compensate their lack of time with me. Anyway, so I took a taxi and just had to cross the street to the school. Street that evening was, for some reason, totally empty, without a sign of a car round. But like a good girl, or probably because I wasn't particularly enthusiastic to get to the cram school so soon, I waited at the crosswalk for the green light. Then I saw a bicycle running towards from my left. A middle-aged man was on it. Nothing unusual by itself, but his face was strange. Once I realized it, I could not stop staring at him. And as he got closer, his eyes met mine. His eyes were impossibly large, his eyeballs as if to pop out any second, and was smiling literally ear to ear. Once met my eyes, his eyes totally locked on my face. I was frozen stuck there as he got closer. I actually didn't smell it, but my mind thought I smelled of nauseating alcohol and garbage as he passed by me. And a strange sensation that I would die. My eyes kept following him, and he too was keep looking at me with that creepy smile even after he passed me, his head still locked back towards me. I creeped out, but just carried on with my day, having no other options. Following day, I again missed the shuttle bus, hooked up with a game, and once again took a taxi to the cram school, and once again was waiting at the crosswalk. The street was again empty, like the day before. And just like the day before, I saw a man approaching on a bike from my left. My eyes locked on him, and I sighed of relief to find he didn't look anyway so strange as the guy I saw the day before. He was really skinny, his dark face half hidden under his cap. He gave me a quick look as he passed and carried on his way. I could then see his dark, sunken eyes like a person who starved for days. He didn't look anyway like the guy I saw the day before. But I could not shake off the feeling it was the same guy. Not 50 meters past me, the guy stopped his bike and turned back to look at me crossing the road. He then turned back, dropped his bike, and started following me. Dark foreboding grabbed me, so I jumped into a corner shop and hid myself at the farthest corner of the little shop, peeping out through between the shelves. And indeed, the guy walked into the shop breathing hard and looked around. His eyes, sitting deep in the dark circles, were clearly glistening with predatory glare. I panicked and could not think any more, and just started running out of the shop. He was following me behind when I looked back. Fortunately, my parents' shop was just about 500 meters away. I ran straight there and jumped into my confused mom's arms. I remember I just screamed, "Hide me, Mom! Hide me away! He's following!" before I fainted. I've always been eat well, sleep well, carefree and healthy child, never seen a ghost or even suffered a sleep paralysis. Except for this one episode. What was the strange guy I saw the first day? Was he even a human or a ghost? What did the second guy want from me? And how did I instinctively know that those two were the same person? Summer 1996. I had a bestie of all besties. I'll call him Kim for the sake of the story. We were really close. When I was with him, I just felt alright. I didn't need anything more. We practically lived together day to day. But suddenly that summer, Kim didn't contact me. I wondered, but just let it be. I think I was so much in tune with him that I was ready to let him be without a second thought. A few days passed in radio silence, and I got a call. It was Kim's sister. "Hello?" I said.
Hi. It's Kim's sister.
I knew Kim's family well too. "Oh yes, how are you?" "What's up? Why do you cry?"
Kim, your friend is dead. Come to XYZ hospital if you want to see him.
"You're joking, right? It's not funny." I raised my voice. But Kim's sister didn't say anything. I quickly made around calls to other mutual friends, and they all already knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" I shouted.
I was afraid it should crush you,
he said. I ran to the hospital. There was Kim's photo on the funeral shrine. He was all smiling. I didn't cry because I couldn't really believe it. Soon Kim's parents and siblings came to me, their faces wet with tears. It hit me only then. Kim. Could this be really true? You were dead? Just like that? My heart broke. I ran out from the funeral home and bought myself 3 bottles of soju and emptied them one by one. I couldn't still stand the pain, so I bought 2 bottles more and drank them up. Guess I passed out shortly afterwards. I found myself in the familiar local park. Kim was next to me, and we were in the middle of a silly banter.
I think I should go now,
Kim said. Already? Well, let me escort you home then, I said.
Knock it off. Do it when you get a girlfriend.
Soon a bus arrived, number 114.
So long,
Kim said, and hopped on the bus. Strangely, I felt impulse that I should go with him. I must be with him. So I jumped on the bus following Kim. The driver's stare at me froze me on the spot. I looked around and saw all the other passengers also staring at me. I had never seen a dead person, but if I had seen one, it must have resembled those faces, I thought. The bus door was closing when Kim literally kicked me, throwing me out onto the pavement. What if? I shouted. The bus started, and I saw Kim gave me a melancholy stare, and the boss that went away fast. I realized that I was holding something in my hand and looked. It was a piece of paper. On it read,
"Be well. I'm sorry that I have to go so soon."
When I got around, I was on a park bench. I must have cried so much while I was out that my face bore strips of dried tears. When I meet friends over a drink, they still occasionally say that I would have died if I stayed on that bus. Then I would think to myself, I wouldn't have minded to stay with Kim. Yet, Kim gave me this life, so I shall live and be well till we meet again. I have a degree in architect, and my first job was by an architectural design office. This is what happened when I worked there. Work slowed down by the late summer, and 6 of us from the office went for a workshop. I called it a workshop, but it was really more like a late summer holiday after the few months of stressful big projects. We spent a day on the beach, and by the late afternoon, we drank. When it wrapped, it was still a bit too early to hit the hay. Then the team leader said he heard the restaurant staff talking about a haunted house at the edge of the village, that it was notorious and dangerous, and we should avoid getting anywhere near there. But the warning only seemed to trigger the leader's interest. He suggested that we should team up by 2, explore the haunted house, and take photos inside as a proof. The leader and a senior staff volunteered to be the first team. The map showed the supposedly haunted house was about 10 minutes walk away from our lodging. Considering the darkness and it being an unfamiliar route, perhaps 30 minutes would be still more than enough to visit there and back. But the first team didn't come back after 40 minutes and then 1 full hour. Neither did they answer our call. The other senior staff said he would go and find out what happened. The rest of us should wait here, and if we didn't hear anything from another 30 minutes, then we should contact an emergency. We 3 young staffs anxiously waited, feeling every minute like an hour. Thankfully, about 50 minutes later, the team leader and 2 senior staffs turned up. They looked fine apart from sweats, which was natural in Korean summer night. So, to lighten up the mood, we joked to the team leader if he didn't prank to scare us. But the usually casual and light-hearted character that was the team leader kept his face stiff. "Is everything all right? Did something happen?" I asked.
Nothing. I just slipped in the dark and sprained my ankle a bit. I think it's not a good idea to visit the damn house in the dark. Let us just call it a day," he said. Indeed, the team leader and the senior staffs soon went to bed after shower, while I and the other 2 young staffs just had a can of BO2 before bed. About a year later, I found a better position and moved to a different company, but kept a contact with the former colleagues from the first job. Another year later, I got a shocking news. That the team leader passed away unexpectedly. He was out to have a jogging as usual before work, and was found dead in the local park later in the day. The cause of death was determined to be a heart attack,
But for some dubious points, like he wasn't found for a few hours in that usually busy local park, I hear there were rumors and speculations about the true cause of death. Then, another year later, the senior staff who went to explore the haunted house with the team leader was found dead too. A suicide, apparently. As I remember, he was a particularly bright and sociable character that I first thought it should be a joke when I heard he chose to end his life. But since I left the first company, he faced various troubles both in private life and at work. At his funeral, I reunited with the former colleagues, and we went to have a drink together afterwards. Then one of the former staff said that he happened to visit the village where we had a workshop again with his friends, and visited the haunted house himself. Inside were several broken wooden crosses and rainbow flags that would be used in a shamanic ritual, torn and scattered around. On one wall, a scribble in red spray paint saying, "Anybody visiting this place will die," or something of that effect. At the time, he didn't think much of it. An abandoned house rumored to be haunted would be often vandalized after all. But now, seeing the team leader and the senior staff who visited the place unexpectedly dead, he couldn't shake off the creepy feeling. Apparently, one of his friends who visited the haunted house together was recently killed at a car accident too. Frankly, that was disturbing. But we all just consoled him that it was all just an unfortunate coincidence and he shouldn't mind about such a thing. Anyway, the former colleague had to leave first, and it was only when he left that the other senior staff who went to find a missing team leader and a colleague opened up about what he saw that summer night. He found the team leader and his colleague standing still inside the house, their torchlight shining the wall in front of them, and the red scribble on it read, "Anybody visiting this place will die." When he called out their name loudly, they seemed to wake up from the trance, and they could return to the lodging if all creeped out. It only added to the already disturbing situation, but I still didn't want to believe that it was really to do with the haunted house or the curse. I said to him it should be our mind trying to see the link where there was none. But should he feel still disturbed, perhaps he could seek a shaman or something, just for the peace of mind. The senior staff declined that he was a devout Catholic, that he would never think of anything like a suicide, and all he wanted was to see his little daughter grow up and get married. And so we parted with smiles. And just this morning, I got a call from the former colleague telling me the other colleague who visited the haunted house with his friends lost his arm from a freak accident at a construction site. And that wasn't even the only bad news. The senior staff was diagnosed with a late-stage pancreatic cancer. He called to ask if I wanted to pay him a visit at the hospital with him.
I don't know what you think about the whole thing, but, we didn't set a foot in that damn house, did we? So we should be fine, don't you think? We should be okay, shouldn't we?
He said at the end of the call. I still don't know what to make of this series of tragedy, but thought record down what happened so far. just in case something happens to me too. The manager of a small beer brewery noticed the most recent batch of beer tasted a bit off, but the order date was due and he signed off the batch out to stores. Later that day, they entered to clean now empty brew tank and found the body of a staff who had gone missing since a week ago. This famous urban myth circulated in the US from the 60s. Over the years, the details sometimes switched to a chocolate factory, water tank, or canned soup factory, etc. But the main structure and the disgust factor remains the same. Now, the same urban myth exists and persists in Korea too. And, sad to say, it's actually based on a true case. The most widely circulated version of the story goes like this. Kang and Kim, both 18, were high school sweethearts. Kang was a son of the owner of a prominent local brewery, and Kim was a famous beauty that everyone knew. But the inner dynamic behind a perfect facade was not as perfect. Kim knew her power over men very well and grew up a gold digger. Having learned Kang was from a rich family, Kim tightened her grip on him, encouraged by Kim's parents who even let the young couple stay at their place. But when Kang learned his girlfriend had a long history with many men, he got distressed. One night he invited Kim to the empty factory of his father's. He accused of and interrogated Kim about her past. Kim denied all of it, and even got naked in front of Kang as to prove her innocence. But facing Kang's unyielding coldness, she fainted. Panicking that Kim was dead, Kang disposed her body in the brew tank. The girl's body was discovered a full month later, and meanwhile, the batch from the tank was bottled and sold off to the market. This version of the story is unfortunately not entirely true. Characterizing the victim as a gold digger and promiscuous is the result of the vigorous smear campaign from the perpetrator's side. It was really not an uncommon tactic to brand the victim of a sexual assault or lost murder as a slut, as if the blame was on the victim. And in this case, the smear campaign worked and stuck largely thanks to the wealth and influence of the perpetrator's family. More recent investigation could capture the first-hand accounts from the people that knew both Kang and Kim. According to them, Kim, the victim, was just an ordinary girl, pretty but not a great beauty, and didn't have any boyfriends either. The fact is close that Kang pursued for Kim and took a grudge when Kim didn't return his interest. If that dynamic be true, it is most unlikely that Kim came to the brewery on her own will, nor how she was ultimately killed was so accidental. Unfortunately, the authority didn't perform autopsy, and will never fully understand what happened to her. The second untrue part in the most circulated version is its most morbid part, that the unsuspecting public drank the dead girl's juice. First, it is clearly untrue that the body stayed in the tank for a month. The murder took place on 8th April 1978, and the report on Kang's arrest was on 26th of the same month. We do not have a record of when exactly the dead body was discovered, but it certainly didn't stay there for a month. Also, the brew tank had a large window to it because it belonged to the factory lab rather than normal production line. All in all, the body must have been spotted quite soon, and highly unlikely that the spirit from the same tank was unwittingly signed off to the market. Unfortunately, there's no satisfying ending to this sad story. Kang, the perpetrator, was sentenced only for 3-year imprisonment. One newspaper pursued further investigation about the case, but the Kang family countered it by buying off all the copies of the weekly magazine containing the investigation. Long before the time of internet, the incident was largely forgotten among public or reduced to a warped urban myth. The brewery business sustained some damage, but carried on until it was sold off to a bigger company in 1985. Kang was released in 1981 after serving the full sentence. We do not know what happened to him afterwards, but considering his family wealth was unaffected, we can speculate he must have led a comfortable enough life. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. Now, time to open my heart to you a bit. I must say, past 1 year has been a turbulent time in my private life. A lot have changed towards negative direction in the way that my former lifestyle is no more sustainable. The loss of my dear friend last April was kind of the last big blow. He was not only more like a family to me, but also he provided me a home in London over a decade, which now I lost together with him. I hope I didn't leave any trace in the end product, but I have to confess, I struggled to find the energy and focus to make the last few episodes for the channel. The ongoing situation are not yet resolved, and I may have to face to make some big choices soon, like downsize and move to a smaller home. Right, so under such circumstances, I'm going to take a break from the channel a while. I don't know yet for how long exactly, but it definitely will be longer than a month. I'm planning to make some more compilation videos from the past 5-year worth of stories, and possibly finally try some short formats, but the regular weekly new episode is going to resume only when I will have collected enough stories and possibly made some episodes in reserve. I hope you understand, and hope you don't totally forget Tales from Korea until then. So, wish me a luck, and I wish you all the best.